Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to another journey into the wonderfully mundane, often surprisingly unsettling corners of history. Tonight we're peeling back the gilded facade of an era often romanticized, inviting you to step into a world that on the surface whispers of elegance and charm. But beneath that veneer lies a reality so utterly alien, so relentlessly demanding, that the very notion of enduring it for a single day might send shivers down your spine. So dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together as you prepare to wake up somewhere truly unfamiliar. You awaken not to the soft glow of a digital alarm or the familiar hum of modern conveniences, but to a profound, unsettling silence, broken only by the faint, distant clang of metal on cobblestone. The air is heavy still and strangely cool, even in the depths of what you assume is a proper bed. As your eyes flutter open, the unfamiliar patterns of a wallpapered ceiling greet you, followed by the sight of heavy draped curtains that block out the meagre morning light. You're in a Victorian house circa 1870s England, and the very structure of society around you is about to make its indelible mark on your day. Your survival, you realise almost immediately, isn't just about navigating the physical space of this grand, chilly dwelling. It's intrinsically tied to where you stand, or rather where you lie within its unseen, unyielding hierarchy. Victorian Britain, you'll quickly learn, operates on a rigid class system, a colossal invisible machine dividing everyone from the lofty aristocracy down to the vast struggling working and impoverished classes. Your birth, a detail utterly beyond your control, has already cast your lot, dictating your access to warmth, food safety, and even the simple luxury of a decent night's sleep. If you woke up on a straw mattress in a cramped attic, your day would be a starkly different, perhaps far shorter ordeal than if you found yourself, as you currently are, nestled in what feels like a featherbed. This pervasive social structure isn't just a concept. It's the very air you breathe, determining every resource available to you, every comfort and every peril you face. The ease with which this household appears to function, the very quiet that surrounds you now, is not a testament to scientific ingenuity or modern efficiency. Oh no. It's built on a foundational layer of extensive, often invisible labour. The apparent effortlessness of a middle or upper-class Victorian existence is in fact propped up by a veritable army of invisible hands. Think for a moment about the sheer constant demand of maintaining a home like this without electricity or running water. Every single fireplace designed to banish the ubiquitous chill needs to be manually lit, its grates cleaned of soot, and its coal scuttles replenished sometimes several times a day. Countless buckets of water for washing, cooking and drinking must be hauled often from an outdoor pump or a basement cistern up numerous flights of stairs. And the cleaning, the relentless, unending battle against coal dust, sooty smudges, and the general grime of a pre-industrialised world falls squarely on shoulders other than your own. You haven't seen them yet, but their presence is already profoundly shaping your nascent Victorian reality. These demanding, often hazardous physical toils highlight a societal model where the comfort and propriety of a privileged few rest heavily on the demanding, frequently unacknowledged labour of many. You lie there, perhaps stretching a little, your muscles stiff in a way that suggests the mattress, while softer than straw, isn't quite the memory foam paradise you're accustomed to. As your eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through the thick curtains, you begin to truly take in your surroundings. This house, you realise, isn't just a dwelling, it's a statement. Every ornate cornice, every heavy piece of mahogany furniture, every precisely placed ceramic figurine on the mantelpiece, they all scream wealth status and an unquestioned position in the grand design of Victorian life. The sheer scale of this multi-storey home, the quietude that pervades it despite its size, speaks volumes. You haven't seen them, but you intuitively understand that this isn't a home maintained by a single overwhelmed individual. This grandeur, this very comfort you're currently experiencing, is fundamentally propped up by the ability to maintain a large staff, maids, cooks, gardeners, footmen. Their unseen presence, their quiet industry, even as you awaken, is the true engine of this domestic machine. These visible markers of prosperity, the sprawling size of the house, the number of unseen hands scurrying about its depths, starkly contrast with the often brutal unseen struggles of the less affluent. Every polished doorknob, every gleaming piece of silver serves as a constant, silent reminder of one's immutable position on the unforgiving social and economic ladder. There's no social mobility to speak of here, not in the way you understand it. You are born into your station, and for most that is where you remain for better or for worse. This societal stratification you quickly sense isn't something debated or questioned. It's largely accepted as the natural order of things. It's as deeply ingrained as the rising sun or the changing seasons. Economic practices too are woven into this tapestry of fixed hierarchy. Resources, particularly land and income, are fiercely controlled by the elite, by those in positions like presumably your current hosts. This systemic control means that basic necessities, things you probably take for granted like reliable access to clean water or a consistent supply of food, are often luxuries dictated not by universal right, but by one's status. It's a world where the vast majority must scramble for scraps while a privileged few control the very levers of existence. You won't find community wells bubbling with pure water on every corner, nor will you find well-stocked grocery stores offering a bounty of fresh produce year-round. No, in this era, everything from a loaf of bread to a bucket of coal is a testament to the stratified economy. You might think about your modern-day electric bill or your weekly grocery run, and realize that even those simple transactions are predicated on a level playing field that simply doesn't exist here. This house, opulent as it may be, is not an island. It is deeply, inextricably connected to the broader, often harsh realities of the Victorian economy, a reality that relies heavily on those with profoundly limited agency. You might find yourself drifting momentarily into a sense of quiet solitude, a rare luxury in your old life. But here in this Victorian house, that quiet is deceptive. It hints at a profoundly different reality for the vast majority of people who make this world function. You see the servants and labourers, the very backbone of this intricate stratified economy, face profound limitations on their personal autonomy. Their lives were not their own. Their existence was primarily defined by their roles and duties, by the relentless demands of their employers, and by the sheer physical necessity of making a meagre living. You won't see them yet, but you might begin to hear them. The muffled creak of a floorboard from a distant attic room, the faint clatter of crockery from the scullery below, the whisper of movement on a back staircase. These are the sounds of lives lived in Spartan conditions, often tucked away in cramped attic rooms or damp basement quarters far from the grand airy spaces you now inhabit. Their wages barely covered basic needs, a stark daily reminder of the deep chasm in living standards and opportunities that separated them from you, the supposed gentle folk. There's no expectation of upward mobility for them, no dreams of a better life fueled by hard work alone. Their hard work simply fuels the lives of others, and while you might assume a life of leisure for the mistress of this grand house, you would be mistaken. Even at the apex of the household hierarchy, the lady of the house faced distinct, often arduous responsibilities that blurred the lines between social expectation and demanding labour. You might imagine her floating gracefully through drawing rooms, but the truth is far more complex. Managing a large Victorian household was akin to running a small, incredibly complex business. You would, if you were in her shoes, be meticulous with account-keeping, tracking, every penny spent on supplies, every wage paid to staff. The oversight of numerous servants, from the cook and the housemaids to the footmen and the stable hands, would be a constant demanding task, requiring an exacting eye for detail and an unwavering adherence to strict societal norms. This wasn't merely about delegating. It was about orchestrating a finely tuned machine, ensuring propriety was maintained, resources were managed, and the household ran with impeccable efficiency, all while conforming to the rigid expectations of your position. No spontaneous trips to the grocery store, no quick online orders here. Every acquisition, every allocation of food or fuel would be a deliberate act of management recorded and meticulously tracked. It's a weight that even from the comfort of your bed you can almost feel settling on your shoulders. As you consider the sheer energy required to run such a household, your mind might naturally drift to the underlying source of that energy. And here in 1870s England there is one king, one indispensable resource that permeates every aspect of life, from the roaring industries outside to the very warmth of this room coal. You haven't felt the heat of a newly stoked fire yet, but the lingering scent in the air, a faint gritty undertone beneath the beeswax polish and old wood, is a constant sensory reminder. That faint gritty undertone in the air, you realise, isn't just a lingering ghost of yesterday's fire. It's the omnipresent signature of this era. Coal was quite literally the lifeblood of Victorian England, not only powering the colossal engines of industry that churned out goods and choked the urban skies, but also heating every single home, fueling every flickering gas lamp and warming every kettle. Its pervasive use meant that the air, even within the confines of what might seem like a well-sealed drawing room, was thick with the scent of coal smoke and a fine, almost imperceptible dust. You might find yourself subtly running a finger over a surface, feeling the faint grit beneath your touch, a constant tactile reminder of the era's absolute reliance on this black gold. This wasn't just an atmospheric detail. It was an inescapable byproduct that coated everything: your clothes, your hair, the very furniture around you, a gritty, ever-present reality that modern life has largely erased. And beneath the industrial hum, beneath the pervasive coal dust, lies the even older, more fundamental truth of the economy, its agrarian underpinnings. Despite all the advancements of the industrial age, agriculture remained the bedrock. The constant battle for essential resources for food itself was a daily relentless concern for everyone, from the lowliest labourer to the wealthiest lord. Food sourcing, preservation and distribution were not the seamless, invisible processes you're used to. You might ponder for a moment how this household gets its butter, its meat, its fresh vegetables. Is there a daily delivery, a weekly market visit? The seasonal availability of produce profoundly impacted diet and daily life for all classes, making the modern luxury of strawberries in December an unimaginable fantasy. Imagine a world where your daily menu is entirely dictated by what can be grown locally, what can be harvested, and what can be preserved. And when it came to preservation, even simple acts like pickling could carry unseen dangers, with methods like lead-sealed jars being common, unknowingly introducing insidious toxins into the very sustenance of the household. This struggle for basic necessities extended far beyond food. The stark absence of modern public utilities meant that basic services, those conveniences you barely register today, were costly, labour-intensive operations. Think about heating, for instance. There's no thermostat to adjust, no central furnace quietly humming in the basement. Each room, if it was lucky enough to have a fireplace, required its own fire to be laid lit and maintained. Every pail of hot water for washing, for tea, for preparing a bath, represented significant resource allocation and physical effort, often borne by the unseen labour force that scurried about the house's hidden corridors. Every flickering gas lamp, providing a surprisingly dim and often smelly illumination, required a manual lighting and constant vigilance against leaks. And sanitation. Every empty chamber pot, every journey to the privy, if you were lucky enough to have one that was actually indoor, represented physical effort and an elaborate, often inefficient system of waste disposal. These weren't just minor inconveniences. They were fundamental challenges that underpinned daily existence, demanding constant attention and energy. You might think that the rapid innovations of the burgeoning Victorian economy and consumer market with new products constantly appearing would bring a greater sense of security or comfort. But here's the unsettling truth: this era operated in a near-complete regulatory void. The absence of oversight was profound, leading to a pervasive unacknowledged danger that you, with your modern sensibilities, would find utterly shocking. This wasn't just about the occasional bad batch of something, it was systemic. Cheap toxic materials were routinely incorporated into everyday goods without a second thought for their long-term health implications. Take the vibrant green dyes, for instance, in clothing and wallpaper. What looked beautiful and progressive was often Scheele's green or Paris green packed with arsenic. You might admire a particularly striking floral pattern on the wall, completely unaware that it's silently releasing poisonous fumes into the air, especially when the room is damp, causing chronic illness and mysterious deaths that were frequently misdiagnosed. This was not just a manufacturing flaw, it was a direct, unregulated consequence of industrial expansion, a testament to profit prioritised over public safety. And it wasn't just the dyes. Think about the water pipes, those essential conduits bringing water into the home. Many were made of lead, slowly leaching toxins into the drinking water. Even the solder used in canned foods often contained lead, turning a seemingly convenient food source into a subtle, insidious poison. This unregulated market meant that the very objects intended to improve life often carried with them a hidden deadly cost. The true currency of this Victorian household, you quickly discern, isn't just coin, though money certainly speaks volumes. Beyond monetary exchange, the domestic economy often ran on the painstaking daily management of resources far more elemental: firewood, lamp oil, and crucially the labour of the staff. This microeconomy of domesticity, with its detailed account books and meticulous inventories, underscored the fundamental struggle to maintain comfort and propriety in an era defined by material and energetic scarcity. Every log burned, every drop of oil consumed, every hour of a servant's toil was a deliberate, calculated expenditure in the ongoing battle against the cold, the dark, and the unpredictable nature of supply. As you lie there, still perhaps half dreaming, you begin to notice the pervasive smells. This isn't the clean, almost sterile air of your modern home, nor the faint hint of industrial cleaners. No, the very air here is a testament to Victorian economic realities, a heavy, complex mix. There's the ever-present coal smoke, a gritty, acrid scent that somehow manages to seep through closed windows. Beneath that, perhaps, is the musty odour of old textiles, polished wood and beeswax, giving the house a distinctly antique aroma. But then you catch something else, something fainter, almost metallic and faintly sulphuric, the unfamiliar scent of gas. These smells aren't just atmospheric. They are the tangible olfactory signature of a society built on the raw extraction and often dangerous application of its primary resources. It's a subtle assault on the senses, a constant low-level reminder that even the air you breathe carries the tangible legacy of this bygone era's industrial might and its profound lack of scientific understanding. You try to take a deep breath and that faint metallic sulphuric tang of gas settles in your lungs, a sensation utterly alien to your modern nose. It's not strong enough to alarm you immediately, but it's there, a constant low-level presence that speaks volumes about the technology of the era. This insidious aroma is a direct consequence of gaslighting, which, while revolutionary for its time, carried a grave, often unacknowledged risk. Carbon monoxide, poisoning a silent killer, left no trace, causing headaches, confusion and death in sleep. Imagine the slow, creeping dread if you knew that the very light illuminating your evenings was a potential harbinger of doom. Yet in the Victorian era, these mysterious ailments or sudden unexplained deaths were often attributed to everything from bad humours to drafts, never the unseen gas leaking from a faulty pipe. And it wasn't just the air. You might crave a glass of cool, refreshing water, but the Victorian water supply was a lottery you wouldn't want to play. Drinking water often stored in lead-lined tanks, again that insidious metal, and drawn from alarmingly contaminated sources slowly poisoned households. Think of the Thames River, for instance, during its infamous Great Stink era. This was the primary source of water for Londoners, a river that was essentially an open sewer. This toxic brew contributed not only to chronic ailments, but also to widespread devastating public health crises like cholera, which swept through populations with terrifying speed and lethality. The simple act of quenching your thirst could be a death sentence, a concept utterly foreign in your world of treated filtered tap water. Stepping outside, if you dared, offered little respite from these perils. The urban landscape was, to put it mildly, a sensory assault. City streets were not paved and clean. They were thick with horse manure, a pervasive pungent smell that would cling to your clothes and hair. This mingled with the acrid, heavy coal smoke billowing from thousands upon thousands of chimneys, creating a noxious blend that often morphed into the infamous London fog, a thick yellowish-brown smog that was not merely atmospheric, but a dense respiratory damaging blanket. It obscured vision, turning familiar streets into treacherous labyrinths, and heightened the sense of danger, making even a short stroll an exercise in environmental endurance. You'd find yourself coughing, your throat scratchy, your eyes watering, a direct consequence of simply existing in this industrialized, unregulated environment. Then there was the food. Food safety as you understand it was virtually non-existent. Every meal was a perilous lottery. Bread might contain chalk to make it appear whiter and heavier, sausages questionable fillers you'd rather not contemplate, and unpasteurized milk was often purified with borax, a deceptive additive that neutralized the taste of spoilage, but did nothing to kill the lurking bacteria. This led to thousands of child deaths, a silent, unacknowledged epidemic caused by ignorance and greed. You might look at a plate of seemingly wholesome food and realize with a chilling sensation that it could be a carrier of illness or poison. The very act of nourishing yourself becomes fraught with anxiety. And if the food was a lottery, the medicine cabinet was a veritable poison cabinet. Forget child-proof caps or regulatory warnings. In Victorian times, commercially sold medicines were commonly prescribed and readily available products laced with potent substances that would shock your modern sensibilities. Opiates like morphine and laudanum, an alcohol-based opium tincture, were ubiquitous, marketed for everything from teething pain in infants to general female complaints. Cocaine was found in tonics, and even arsenic was used in various curatives. Imagine the quiet horror of realizing that the very treatments for your ailments could turn into causes of addiction, severe organ damage, or accidental overdose. A simple headache could lead to a lifelong dependency prescribed by a well-meaning but utterly uninformed doctor. This was a world where remedies often compounded the suffering, a direct consequence of a rapidly expanding pharmaceutical market, devoid of any meaningful oversight. Beyond these insidious poisons, the Victorian home itself, for all its grand architecture, presented clear and present physical dangers. You might notice as you eventually stir from your bed the steep, often narrow and uneven staircases, particularly those leading to the servant areas or upper floors. These weren't built to modern safety codes with generous treads and sturdy handrails. No, they were often dimly lit, precariously steep, and for the servants rushing up and down them countless times a day, a leading cause of domestic accidents, including fatal falls. A wrong step, a moment of distraction, and a simple descent could turn deadly. Even the fashion of the era, which you'll soon contend with, added its own layer of physical peril. Fashionable bustles, those voluminous frameworks that gave women their distinctive silhouette, could collapse embarrassingly at an inopportune moment, or worse, catch fire if their wearer stood too close to a roaring fireplace. Imagine the sudden horror of your elaborate gown igniting a direct consequence of simply conforming to the era's aesthetic demands. Daily life was a delicate dance with the unpredictable. And then there was the omnipresent, heartbreaking reality of high mortality. Childhood illnesses like diphtheria and scarlet fever conditions that are largely treatable or preventable today were often fatal even for the wealthiest families in an era before antibiotics or modern medical interventions. The simple act of a child falling ill could plunge a family into despair, knowing that little could be done. Similarly, childbirth carried immense risks with hemorrhage and infection, claiming countless lives. This constant, pervasive threat of untimely death profoundly shaped family dynamics, imbuing daily life with a quiet sense of vulnerability that you living in an age of relative medical certainty can scarcely comprehend. Every birth was a gamble, every sniffle a potential harbinger of tragedy. This deep-seated awareness of life's fragility permeated every aspect of existence, from the rituals of mourning to the way children were raised. It was a background hum of sorrow, a constant reminder of how thin the veil between life and death truly was. As you finally decide to venture out of bed, your first true physical confrontation with this new reality begins. You've been spared the worst of the cold, nestled under thick blankets, but the moment your feet touch the floor, you'll experience a chill that settles deep in your bones, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled environments you're used to. You swing your legs out of bed, and the instant your bare feet meet the floor, a shock of pervasive cold assaults you. It's not just cool, it's genuinely frigid, seeping into your bones in a way that modern central heating has long rendered obsolete. Even in what is clearly an affluent home, the absence of any ambient warmth ensures that the frigid morning air bites at exposed skin, leaving visible puffs of breath in the stillness. You might find yourself quickly drawing your feet back, or huddling deeper into the covers for one last moment of warmth, a stark reminder of reliance on individual fireplaces that are yet to be lit by unseen hands, or perhaps are a luxury reserved for the main living spaces. This isn't the gentle chill of an autumn morning in your world. This is a cold that feels ancient, uncompromising, and utterly pervasive. As you reluctantly push yourself up, you realize the mattress beneath you is a surprising landscape of lumps and unfamiliar textures. It's likely stuffed with coarse horsehair, or if you were slightly less fortunate, rustling straw. You might have felt the subtle prick of a spring or the unyielding firmness of compacted material, a far cry from the yielding foam and ergonomic designs of your modern bed. The tactile difference is a constant, subtle irritation, making deep, untroubled rest feel like a rare luxury, something you might achieve after sheer physical exhaustion, rather than inherent comfort. You probably slept fitfully, your body subtly protesting the unaccustomed firmness and the alien chill of the room. This bed, while a symbol of comfort by Victorian standards, is a tangible representation of a world where softness and ergonomic support simply weren't priorities in the way they are today. When you finally decide to fully emerge, your bare feet once again meet bare wood, cold as ice. There are likely only scattered rugs offering minimal patches of warmth against the pervasive chill that radiates from the floorboards. This simple detail underscores the ongoing battle against the cold within the domestic space, making any movement outside the confines of your bed a bracing, almost invigorating experience. You might even find yourself instinctively tiptoeing, trying to minimize contact with the icy planks, wishing for the plush carpeting or heated floors you took for granted. The lack of uniform warmth means that comfort is localized, limited to the immediate vicinity of a roaring fire if and when one is lit. This stark reality of cold and discomfort also serves as a potent reminder of class distinctions even within the same household. While your current room might boast ornate wallpaper, a grand fireplace, albeit unlit, and heavy drapes, the Spartan quarters of the servants tucked away in attics or basements are markedly different. You haven't seen them yet, but you can imagine them narrow, minimally furnished rooms, perhaps sharing a single small fireplace among several individuals if they were lucky. These contrasting living spaces paint a vivid picture of the vast disparities in comfort, emphasizing the profound human cost behind the household's warmth and the master's ease. The luxury you experience is built on the daily endurance of others in much harsher conditions, a truth that hangs silently in the cold morning air. As you begin to prepare yourself for the day, you might instinctively glance towards a mirror, and here too you'll encounter another subtle deviation from your accustomed reality. The mirrors in this Victorian home, with their wavy glass, offer a slightly distorted look to your reflection. It's not a funhouse mirror effect, but enough to add a subtle sense of unreality to the daily ritual of personal assessment. Perhaps your nose seems a little longer, your jawline a little softer, or your eyes a touch more elongated than you remember. This minor imperfection in the glass is a quiet underscore of the lack of precise manufacturing and standardized quality control that permeated everyday objects in this era. You're used to near-perfect reflections, crystal clear and unblemished, but here even something as simple as a mirror reminds you that precision was a luxury and flaws were simply part of the fabric of existence. It's a small detail, but it subtly disorients, adding to the pervasive feeling of being out of time and place. And as the day progresses, or rather as you anticipate the transition from day to night, the concept of darkness takes on a whole new meaning. In your modern world, true darkness is rare, constantly punctuated by the blinking lights of electronics, the ambient glow of distant cities, or the streetlights just outside your window. But in Victorian England, as night fell, true darkness descended heavy, thick, and almost absolute. Illumination came from flickering gas lamps which cast an eerie yellowish glow, or from the softer dancing light of candles. These rudimentary light sources cast long, shifting shadows that could make familiar rooms feel imposing and unfamiliar, transforming grand spaces into cavernous, almost frightening voids. You wouldn't be able to navigate by the light of your phone. You'd need a conscious, heightened sense of awareness to move through the house, lest you stumble on an unseen obstacle, or worse, on one of those treacherous staircases. The quiet hum of your appliances, the subtle glow of standby lights, all gone. Instead, there's a deeper quiet broken only by the crackle of fire or the occasional creak of an old house, settling, amplifying the feeling of isolation and vulnerability in the encroaching gloom. As the morning progresses, thoughts of food will undoubtedly arise. You're likely accustomed to a quick, perhaps portable breakfast, a smoothie, or a slice of toast eaten on the go. But here in this Victorian household, mornings began with a surprisingly lavish meal, even if you were the only one dining. This hearty breakfast was considered absolutely essential for health, a cultural emphasis on substantial multi-course morning sustenance that would likely shock your modern metabolism. Imagine a spread: eggs, bacon, sausages, fish toast, muffins, jam, all laid out, perhaps kept warm over small flames on silver dishes. It's a veritable feast, a testament to the household's prosperity, and a stark contrast to the quick, often minimalist breakfast of your time. This isn't just about hunger, it's about ritual, about signalling status and the start of a productive, well-fed day. You sit at the table, perhaps a grand dining table laden with the impressive breakfast spread. The sheer volume of food for one person is almost overwhelming, a testament to the Victorian belief that a robust morning meal was the foundation of health and vigour. But as you look at the array of dishes, you might notice some subtle differences in preparation or presentation that hint at acquired tastes and more ominously unseen adulterations. The coffee, for instance, often described as notoriously strong and bitter, was frequently stretched with chicory or even burnt sugar. This wasn't merely a matter of taste preference. It was a cost-saving measure, a way to make expensive coffee beans go further, but it fundamentally compromised the flavour and often introduced other unidentifiable elements. You might take a sip and find it unpleasantly harsh, far from the nuanced, often sweetened and flavoured coffees you're used to. And then there's the toast. Breakfast toast was typically dry and plain, often unbuttered. You might find yourself searching for a butter dish only to realise that in this culinary tradition, simplicity sometimes masked a greater truth. While this specific detail might just be a difference in custom, it subtly reminds you that in other less obvious aspects of Victorian cuisine, this simplicity often masked hidden additives or shortcuts. You're constantly walking a tightrope between what appears wholesome and what might in fact be subtly compromised. Every bite, every sip becomes an exercise in cautious discernment. Lunch, when it arrived, was simpler by Victorian standards, often consisting of cold meats, bread, cheese and fruit. It was a lighter affair than breakfast, a practical meal consumed amidst the day's duties. Yet, from your modern perspective, this lighter meal still necessitated caution. The lingering awareness of non-existent food safety standards would make every bite a calculated risk. Was the meat properly stored? Had the cheese been exposed to contaminants? You wouldn't have the luxury of trusting that your food had been handled, processed and regulated to the meticulous standards you're accustomed to. Every simple meal could, unbeknownst to the Victorians, be a vector for unseen illnesses, a quiet menace lurking beneath the surface of daily sustenance. Perhaps you're offered a glass of wine or spirits, a common accompaniment to meals for many Victorians. But here, the casual consumption of such beverages was fraught with danger. Wine and spirits were frequently adulterated with all sorts of additives, including shockingly lead used for sweetness. This reflects a pervasive disregard for consumer health in the pursuit of profit, turning a social custom into a potentially toxic habit. Even milk, a staple for families, was often unpasteurized and purified, with borax deceptively neutralizing the taste of spoilage, but doing nothing to kill lurking bacteria. This hidden killer contributed to thousands of child deaths, annually a tragic testament to the era's ignorance about microbiology and the unchecked practices of unscrupulous vendors. The pervasive threat of food fraud extended far beyond leaded wine and borax-laced milk. You might consider the most basic staples the very foundation of the Victorian diet, and realise they too were not immune. Bread, the staff of life, could contain alum or chalk, added to make it appear whiter and heavier, deceiving consumers about its quality and density. Sausages, a common and affordable source of protein, often harboured questionable fillers, things you'd rather not contemplate, remnants perhaps from less savoury parts of animals, or even entirely non-food ingredients. Even tea, seemingly innocent, might hide actual iron filings to increase its weight and thus its price. This widespread food adulteration wasn't an isolated incident. It was a common, almost accepted practice in an unregulated market. It made trust in one's daily meals a genuine challenge, rendering even the simplest acts of eating potentially hazardous. You'd find yourself constantly subtly evaluating your food, looking for anything that seemed off, a skill you never had to develop in your own time. In sum, the Victorian diet was a strange mix of contradictions. On one hand, for the privileged, a wealth of food could be laid out, a lavish display of abundance. On the other, it was defined by monotonous staples for the working classes, and for everyone an insidious underlying threat of contamination and adulteration. From the water used to cook to the very ingredients themselves, the precariousness of daily sustenance was a constant, if often unacknowledged, companion. You might finish a meal feeling full, but with a lingering sense of unease, a faint suspicion that something you ingested might not have been entirely wholesome. It's a quiet dread that permeates every aspect of daily life, turning nourishment into a subtle game of Russian roulette. After the hearty breakfast, the practicalities of Victorian hygiene would quickly become apparent. You're used to turning a tap and having an endless supply of hot, clean water at your fingertips. Here, that's an unimaginable luxury. A true bath was a laborious undertaking, not a quick shower. It required servants, those unseen hands you've already conceptualized, to haul buckets of hot water up flights of stairs to a portable metal tub, often placed in front of a roaring fire in your bedroom. This process transformed what you consider a private ablution into a semi-public production, highlighting a stark contrast to modern concepts of personal privacy and convenience. Imagine the flurry of activity, the clanging of buckets, the steaming water, all to facilitate your cleanliness. It's an elaborate ritualistic effort emphasizing the value placed on cleanliness amid scarcity and the profound dependence on a dedicated workforce. For everyday cleansing, the reliance was placed on a porcelain pitcher and basin filled with steaming water. This method necessitated a localized, methodical approach to washing. You'd wash your face, your hands, perhaps your neck and arms, but a full body scrub was a rare event. It's far removed from the ease and thoroughness of modern running water and showers, and certainly less efficient. You'd likely feel clean enough, but never truly sparkling, a subtle discomfort to someone accustomed to complete and effortless cleanliness. You might pick up a bar of soap expecting a gentle, fragrant lather, only to find a hard yellow bar that smells strongly of lye. This wasn't the dermatologically tested pH-balanced soap of your era. It was an abrasive cleanser, often harsh and unforgiving. You might feel your skin tighten, perhaps even burn slightly after using it, a tangible reminder of the crude chemistry of the time. This harsh reality was particularly evident on the hands of the servants whose skin was perpetually red and chapped from constant exposure to such powerful cleaning agents and endless scrubbing. Their hands, you realize, would be a visual testament to the harsh realities of cleaning agents used indiscriminately, a testament to endless toil and the lack of protective measures. And then there's the unavoidable visceral reality of sanitation. The immediate and most common toilet facility was the chamber pot tucked discreetly under the bed. This, you quickly realize, is a profound and intimate reminder of the complete lack of universal indoor plumbing. Imagine the daily ritual emptying it yourself, or more likely having a servant perform this less than glamorous duty. Even when rudimentary flush toilets began to appear, they remained a novelty, often requiring a simple pull chain, and lacking advanced features to contain sewer gases or prevent blockages. The pervasive, faint yet unsettling odour that might occasionally waft through parts of the house would be a constant testament to the challenges of waste management in this era, a far cry from the sanitised, invisible systems of your time. You'd quickly learn to hold your breath, or simply to acclimatise to what was considered a normal, if unpleasant, background scent. Beyond physical dirt hygiene also involved contending with a multitude of persistent odours that permeated Victorian homes. There was the general mustiness of old homes, the faint, pervasive smell of damp and disuse that clung to fabrics and woodwork. The ever-present coal smoke which settled on everything added its own acrid layer. And that faint, unsettling scent of gas leaks you noticed earlier. It's always there, a subtle atmospheric element that constantly challenged the sense of cleanliness and contributed to a generalised low-level feeling of being unwell. A quiet malaise that you might mistakenly attribute to a cold or fatigue. These smells weren't just unpleasant. They were constant reminders of the battle against the elements and the limitations of Victorian technology. For the elite, maintaining meticulous grooming and dressing in specific elaborate walking costumes was a daily obligation, not a choice. These layered, often restrictive outfits, complete with gloves, hats and multiple petticoats, were designed to protect from the elements and from public scrutiny, but they also dragged in the street muck from outside. This necessitated boot scrapers at every doorway and a constant, vigilant battle against dirt that was an integral part of simply maintaining social propriety and a clean appearance. Imagine the sheer physical effort required just to present yourself to the world, a constant dance of cleanliness and contamination. This wasn't about personal preference. It was about rigid social demand, a visual testament to your status and adherence to the unspoken rules of the era. As you consider the elaborate walking costume and the myriad layers involved, you realise that simply getting dressed in the Victorian era was not a simple act but a complex project. It involved numerous layers, petticoats, corsets and dresses, each meticulously constructed and requiring significant physical effort to don. You might stare at the array of undergarments, utterly bewildered by the sheer volume and complexity. The corset in particular would present a baffling puzzle, a bewildering array of laces, stays and hooks that could rarely be fastened without assistance. Imagine struggling with a garment designed to constrict your very breathing, a device that fundamentally reshaped your body. This reliance on assistance for such an intimate daily act symbolized a profound dependency woven into the fabric of daily life for Victorian women of means. You're not a self-sufficient modern individual here. You're part of a system even in the most private moments. The fashionable pursuit of a tiny waist through tight lacing meant that corsets were in essence torture devices. They caused restricted breathing, leaving you constantly gasping for air even during light activity. Your internal organs were compressed, leading to digestive issues and a general sense of discomfort. Ribs could become deformed, a permanent alteration to your skeletal structure, leading to chronic pain and long-term health problems. Fainting spells were common, not a sign of delicate sensibilities, but a direct consequence of your lungs struggling for air. This daily self-inflicted burden highlighted the extreme lengths to which Victorian women were expected to go. To conform to beauty standards, a silent internal suffering accepted as the price of propriety. You might feel a dull ache in your chest, a constant pressure that limits your ability to take a full, satisfying breath. A subtle yet pervasive reminder of societal expectations literally squeezing the life out of you. While you're struggling with your own constrained attire, consider the unrelenting toil of the household staff. For them, daily life was an unbroken chain of arduous tasks beginning long before dawn. Maids rose in the pre-dawn darkness to light fires, prepare baths, and manage the vast household before the family even stirred. Their days were filled with a relentless series of physical demands, from hauling heavy buckets of coal and water up and down stairs, leading to chronic back injuries, to battling dust and fumes that caused respiratory issues. Their hands, as you recall, were perpetually red and chapped from caustic soaps and harsh cleaning agents, often suffering from painful chilblains in the cold, damp conditions of unheated service areas. Their occupational hazards weren't just physical. They included chemical burns from lye and other strong cleansers. This was not merely work. It was a grueling, physically demanding existence that slowly wore down the body. Even for the lady of the house, managing the domestic sphere was far from a leisurely pursuit. It was physically and mentally demanding. It involved meticulous record-keeping, constant oversight of a large staff, and the physical act of navigating a large, often chilly and multi-storied home, sometimes in her own restrictive clothing. The lines between leisure and labour blurred significantly as her role demanded an active, constant engagement with the running of the household, a different kind of toil than that of the servants, but toil nonetheless. Among the most dangerous and physically demanding tasks within the Victorian household was laundry. You might imagine a simple chore, a modern convenience with a push of a button. But here laundry work was a gauntlet of hazards. It involved using caustic soaps that burned the skin, large vats of boiling water that could scald with a splash, and cumbersome hand-cranked mangles used to wring out heavy wet fabrics. These mangles, with their powerful rollers, could easily crush fingers if one was not constantly vigilant. Prolonged exposure to harsh chemicals like oxalic acid used for bleaching led to severe skin damage, respiratory problems from the fumes and chemical burns. What seems like a mundane chore was, for those tasked with it, a genuine threat to their health and safety, turning a seemingly simple domestic duty into a physically brutal and potentially life-altering occupation. Beyond the immediate dangers, the weight and constriction of multiple layers of clothing, particularly the corset, profoundly limited physical movement and dictated posture. You would find yourself walking with a particular gait, perhaps even sitting in a specific manner due to the enforced rigidity of your attire. This often led to persistent aches and strains, a constant low-level physical discomfort that became an everyday reality. This enforced inactivity, combined with a diet not geared towards cardiovascular health, and a general lack of understanding about exercise contributed to a generalized state of poor physical well-being. Even simple strolls which might seem relaxing became taxing endeavours due to the sheer weight and restrictiveness of your walking costume. You wouldn't feel agile or light. You'd feel encased, burdened, and constantly aware of the physical presence of your clothing. Now shift your thoughts from your own discomfort to the lives of the youngest members of this household. Victorian child rearing, even among the wealthy, prioritised simplicity and discipline over indulgence. You might expect lavish nurseries filled with toys, but the reality was often far more austere. Children slept in fairly simple beds, perhaps similar to yours in their lack of modern comforts, and excessive toys were discouraged. This reflected a stern philosophy aimed at instilling moral character obedience and self-restraint from a young age, rather than fostering unbridled creativity or emotional expression. It was a preparation for a life dictated by duty and societal roles, not individual whims. However, even these seemingly innocent nurseries harboured insidious dangers. Alphabet blocks, wooden toys, and even the rosy cheeks of dolls were often painted with lead or mercury-based pigments. Children, through natural play, mouthing toys, perhaps chewing on a painted block, ingested these sweet-tasting toxins, risking neurological damage and other severe health problems. Imagine the quiet horror of realising that the very objects meant to educate and entertain were slowly poisoning the innocent, a hidden menace lurking in the heart of childhood. It's a stark reminder that the lack of regulation pervaded every corner of Victorian life, even the most cherished and vulnerable spaces. The vulnerability of youth in this era was not limited to hidden toxins in toys. Despite apparent wealth, children faced heartbreakingly high mortality rates from common childhood illnesses like diphtheria and measles. These diseases, for which Victorian medicine had no effective treatment, swept through families with terrifying swiftness. This omnipresent threat of death cast a heavy shadow over family life, perhaps contributing to a perceived emotional distance by modern standards. Parents grappling with a constant fear of losing their little ones might have adopted a certain stoicism, a protective emotional shell against the inevitable heartbreak that frequently befell even the most privileged households. You might witness a quiet sadness in a mother's eyes, a subtle tension that speaks of past losses or the ever-present anxiety of future ones. Beyond health education for girls of the middle and upper classes was highly specialised, not designed for intellectual development or personal independence, but for social utility. It focused on accomplishments like scripture, French, and needlework. The goal was singular: to mould them into proper Victorian ladies suitable for marriage. Your own education, with its emphasis on critical thinking and professional development, would be utterly alien to this system. Here a girl's learning was a carefully curated path towards securing a respectable husband and managing a household, not about exploring her own potential or pursuing a career. It was a training for a predetermined role, a rigid blueprint for life that left little room for deviation. The emphasis on detailed handwork in poor lighting activities like embroidery, reading small print or drawing, often led to early onset vision problems in children. While eyeglasses existed, they were not always promptly provided, and a lingering stigma attached to wearing them sometimes prevented their use. This was particularly true for girls whose appearance was deemed crucial for their future marriage prospects. Imagine struggling to see your eyes constantly strained, yet being discouraged from seeking the aid that would alleviate your discomfort, all for the sake of social perception. It's a small but poignant example of societal expectations taking precedence over individual well-being. Finally, consider the concept of play. Victorian children were expected to behave like miniature adults and were dressed in formal layered outdoor attire that mirrored adult clothing. This early imposition of social strictures and physical constraints severely limited the freedom of childhood. Instead of uninhibited running and spontaneous exploration, energy was channeled into structured activities, formal lessons and supervised walks. You wouldn't see children freely romping covered in mud and laughing loudly. You'd see carefully composed little figures, their movements restricted, their boisterousness subdued. It was a childhood shaped by the pervasive pressure to conform, to always present a proper, disciplined image, blurring the lines between childhood and adulthood. This societal expectation, as much as physical danger, defined the Victorian experience from its earliest years. Having explored the physical constraints and personal realities of daily life, your mind would naturally turn to the overarching systems of power and control that governed this world, the invisible forces that shaped every interaction, every decision, from the grandest gesture to the quietest sigh. As you navigate this Victorian household, even mentally, you begin to grasp that it is far more than just a collection of rooms and people. It is a meticulously ordered microcosm of the broader societal hierarchies. This home, you quickly discern, operates on a strict hierarchy, a rigid pecking order where every single member, from the master of the house to the lowliest scullery maid, has a defined and understood place. There is no ambiguity, no democratic blurring of lines. You wouldn't, for example, find the lady of the house intruding on the cook's domain to offer cooking advice even if she felt inclined. Such an act would be a breach of etiquette, a transgression against the established order. This illustrates a rigidly enforced division of authority within the domestic sphere, a system where everyone knew their role, their duties, and their precise position in the chain of command. It's like a complex living flowchart with clear lines of responsibility and power, and you as an outsider would have to learn to instinctively read and adhere to it. In wealthy households like this one, even the most intimate tasks, such as childcare, were systematically delegated to a hierarchy of servants. Nannies, nursery maids and night nurses would handle the day-to-day upbringing, feeding, dressing and comforting of the children. This systematic delegation of care underscored a societal expectation that direct parental comfort, particularly from the mother, was often considered unusual, even inappropriate for the upper classes. It wasn't that Victorian mothers didn't love their children, but their affection was often expressed through management and oversight, rather than direct hands-on nurturing. This highlights an emotional constraint driven by class and decorum, a subtle but profound difference in the very fabric of family relationships compared to your modern understanding. You might feel a pang of sadness for the children, or perhaps a strange sense of detachment from the family you are supposedly a part of. Daily life within this system was not spontaneous. It was meticulously choreographed by cascading demands for unquestioning obedience to social rituals. From the maid rising before dawn to light fires and prepare baths to the lady of the house, meticulously preparing a specific walking costume for her afternoon promenade, every single action was governed by a strict inherited code. This code emphasized conformity over individual preference, duty over desire. You don't choose your clothes based on comfort or mood. You choose them based on the time of day and the social activity. You don't speak freely. You speak within the bounds of propriety. It's a relentless performance, a constant adherence to a script written generations ago with no room for improvisation. The very architecture and interior design of the house served as a constant physical reinforcement of these rigid class divisions. You might notice the stark contrast between the plain, functional servants' areas, the Spartan kitchen, the utilitarian scullery, the narrow, unadorned back stairs and the ornate family spaces, the grand drawing room with its velvet drapes and polished furniture, the formal dining room, the elegant parlours. These visual delineations served as clear, unambiguous boundaries, constantly reminding everyone of their place and authority, a silent, pervasive language of power embedded in the very structure of the home. Beyond the physical layout of the house, the pervasive nature of social scrutiny acted as a powerful informal mechanism of control, enforcing conformity to an intricate set of unspoken rules. Public encounters, even those seemingly casual, were highly ritualized. The exchange of calling card, for instance, was not just a polite formality. It was a complex dance of social signalling, announcing visits, gauging willingness to receive guests, and signifying social effort. You couldn't just drop by unannounced. You had to follow the strict protocol, leaving a card waiting for a response, and then adhering to the precise timings of morning calls or afternoon teas. Dining etiquette, too, was a minefield of prescribed behaviours demanding a polite, somewhat reserved demeanour, and constant attention and self-monitoring. Every fork placement, every conversational turn, every sip of wine was observed and judged. Imagine the mental exhaustion of maintaining this relentless performance of etiquette, where even a casual encounter turned into a demanding social tightrope walk. You're constantly aware of being watched, assessed, and subtly critiqued. This constant external gaze shaped your internal world, suppressing spontaneity and fostering a deep-seated need for approval and adherence to norms. The underlying philosophy of this system was simple. The inequality of Victorian society was stark and accepted as natural. Despite the profound disparities in living conditions and opportunities, few challenged the fundamental structures creating such divides. It reflected a deeply ingrained societal belief in a fixed order, often justified by religious or philosophical arguments where one's societal role was often synonymous with their inherent worth. You might, with your modern democratic ideals, find this utterly incomprehensible, but here it's simply the way things are. To question it would be to question the very fabric of existence, to suggest that the sky might not be blue or that gravity might not exist. This acceptance was perhaps the most powerful form of control. Now let's consider the legal and enforcement mechanisms of this era, or rather their striking absence, particularly in areas that would profoundly impact your daily life. A critical legal and enforcement mechanism in Victorian England, especially concerning your well-being, was its glaring void in crucial areas like consumer protection. Victorian food safety standards were, to put it mildly, well non-existent. This wasn't just a minor oversight. It was a fundamental regulatory failure that left you utterly vulnerable. Household products were similarly unregulated, allowing for the widespread unchecked use of toxic substances. The arsenic in the wallpaper, the lead in your paint, the mercury in clothing dyes. These weren't illegal, they were simply part of the unregulated market. There was no governmental body, no consumer advocacy group, no public outcry powerful enough to stop manufacturers from using the cheapest, most readily available and often deadliest materials, as long as they served their purpose and turned a profit. You, the consumer, were on your own, unknowingly navigating a minefield of hidden poisons. The lack of regulation extended even to what you might consider the most sensitive of products' medicines. Your modern pharmacy is a highly regulated environment, with strict controls on what can be sold, how it's prescribed, and what warnings must be displayed. In Victorian England, however, the medicine cabinet was, as previously noted, truly perilous. Legitimate, commercially sold medicines readily available without modern oversight frequently contained dangerous and addictive substances. Opiates like morphine and laudanum were common, often touted as miracle cures for a vast array of ailments. Chloral hydrate, a potent sedative, was also widely used. Imagine walking into an apothecary and being able to purchase these powerful mind-altering substances as easily as you would buy a loaf of bread, with no prescription, no warnings, and no understanding of their long-term effects. Doctors often unknowingly and with the best of intentions prescribed these poisonous concoctions for common ailments, leading to widespread addiction, chronic organ damage, and accidental deaths. It was a severe regulatory failure, turning healthcare into a game of chance, with the patient always at a disadvantage. Public health improvements, when they occurred, were almost always reactive rather than preventative. Major advancements such as the construction of London's vast sewer system were spurred by devastating crises like the Great Stink of 1858, when the Thames became so foul that Parliament could barely sit, and subsequent cholera outbreaks from contaminated water. Innovations like Thomas Crapper's siphon valve for toilets, which helped contain sewer gases, emerged only after the dangers of sewer gas explosions and the spread of disease became painfully clear. This underscores a chilling truth: safety evolved from tragic lessons, not from foresight. You lived in a world where preventative measures were largely absent, and society often had to suffer immense losses before implementing crucial reforms. It's a stark contrast to your modern world, where safety standards are often proactively legislated before widespread harm occurs. The article sharply contrasts this Victorian peril with modern safety, and for good reason. You take for granted the intricate web of building codes, food safety regulations, and consumer protection laws that safeguard your daily existence. These boring bureaucratic rules, as you might casually dismiss them today, are in fact the essential legal frameworks that prevent the widespread dangers Victorians face daily. They dictate everything from the materials used in your home to the ingredients in your food, from the safety of your medicines to the structural integrity of the buildings you inhabit. These regulations, the result of a century and a half of hard-won lessons, are the invisible shields that protect you. They demonstrate the critical, often unappreciated role of governance in ensuring public safety, a concept barely nascent in the 1870s. Without modern legal recourse or safety standards, individuals were profoundly vulnerable to environmental hazards and unsafe products. There was little accountability for manufacturers or landlords regarding the hidden killers in homes or cities. You couldn't sue someone for lead poisoning from your water pipes, or for chronic illness caused by arsenic wallpaper. Effectively, the full burden of survival and risk mitigation was placed onto the individual and the household, a responsibility that modern society has largely absorbed. The rapid introduction of new technologies and products in the Victorian era often outpaced any understanding of their risks. This absence of proactive legal or scientific oversight meant that advancements like gaslighting, while convenient and seemingly progressive, inadvertently introduced new, unacknowledged dangers like carbon monoxide poisoning. These innovations, welcome for their immediate benefits, contributed to mysterious illnesses and deaths that went largely unexplained, simply added to the already high mortality rates, and were often attributed to vague, unscientific causes. You could be delighted by a new invention one day, and unknowingly fall victim to its silent perils the next, with no one being the wiser. This leads us to consider the ever-present shadow of death, and the concept of honour as a subtle, pervasive form of societal control. The article paints a vivid, albeit quiet, picture of death as an omnipresent reality in Victorian life. You've already learned about the high mortality rates stemming from prevalent diseases, accidents, and household poisons, particularly affecting children and women in childbirth. It wasn't a distant, abstract concept. It was a constant companion knocking at every door, every family touched by its cold hand. This close proximity to death fostered a different, more fatalistic acceptance of life's brevity. Funerals were elaborate affairs, mourning periods extensive, but beneath the rituals was a quiet resignation, an understanding that life was fragile and fleeting. While not explicitly detailing rituals like seppuku, the implied resilience of Victorians, their ability to adapt and survive amidst unacknowledged dangers, their stoicism in the face of widespread suffering, suggests a cultural expectation of endurance. This unspoken expectation to endure hardships without overt complaint was a powerful social code. You were expected to bear your burdens, to face adversity with fortitude rather than fragility. To complain too much, to show too much weakness, would be considered unseemly, a character flaw, in a world that valued strength and perseverance above all else. It's a subtle pressure, but a powerful one, shaping the emotional landscape of the era. One of the most chilling examples of societal control, particularly over women, manifested in the punitive nature of medical intervention. Women suffering from conditions categorized as hysteria, a catch-all term that often masked undiagnosed depression, anxiety, or even physical ailments stemming from their restrictive lives face severe medical treatments. These could range from rest cures, involving complete isolation and forced inactivity, to extreme surgical interventions like the barbaric removal of the ovaries. Imagine having your emotional distress pathologized and treated with such drastic, often damaging procedures. This demonstrates how medical authority operating without modern ethical oversight served as a tool of control over female bodies and minds, often with devastating long-term consequences silencing dissent or uncomfortable realities. The widespread doctor-prescribed use of opiates like laudanum led to an addiction epidemic that was rarely acknowledged. This societal blind spot and lack of control disproportionately affected women who were frequently prescribed these potent drugs for female complaints, from menstrual pain to nervousness. This created cycles of dependency, further reinforcing their vulnerability and keeping them sedated both literally and figuratively within the confines of their constrained lives. Perhaps one of the most insidious yet widely accepted forms of societal control, especially over women, was embodied in fashion itself. The relentless societal pressure to conform to beauty standards exemplified by the torture devices of corsets was a powerful informal mechanism of social control. As you might already be feeling, these garments led to restricted breathing, compressed internal organs and deformed ribs, causing chronic pain and long-term health issues. This pursuit of a fashionably tiny waist, even at the cost of chronic pain, fainting spells and organ damage, underscored the dominance of societal expectations over individual well-being. It wasn't about personal choice, it was about public presentation, about adhering to an ideal that literally reshaped the female body to fit a prescribed aesthetic. This daily self-inflicted burden was a constant physical reminder of society's pervasive grip. The constant need for women to change into specific, often restrictive outfits for different activities, morning dress, walking costume, evening dress, reflected a complete lack of choice in personal presentation. This wasn't just about showing off. It was a daily ritual, a visual confirmation of adherence to strict social codes. While seemingly mundane, this practice underscored a rigid system of control, where conformity dictated even the most intimate aspects of life, leaving little room for individual expression or comfort. You're not dressing for yourself. You're dressing for society, for the eyes of others, to fulfill a role. Having seen the structures of power and the mechanisms of control, you would also begin to sense the underlying seeds of discontent and hardship, even from your privileged position in this grand house. While your current focus has been on a wealthy household, the article subtly highlights the pervasive economic grievances of the working classes. Descriptions of Spartan servant quarters, wages that barely covered their basic needs, and the desperate measures of the poor, burning furniture when coal ran out, underscore the daily grind of poverty and resource scarcity that was the reality for the vast majority. You might imagine the unseen struggle, the hunger, the cold that existed just beyond the walls of your comfortable home, a constant nagging counterpoint to your own ease. The absence of formal relief efforts or comprehensive social welfare systems meant that the poor disproportionately bore the brunt of environmental calamities, economic downturns and health crises. There was no safety net, no government assistance to fall back on. If you lost your job or fell ill or faced a bad harvest, you were largely on your own, dependent on charity or the kindness of strangers. This systemic neglect created pervasive suffering and fertile ground for social discontent, even if it didn't always erupt into large-scale rebellions. The quiet desperation of the masses was a powerful simmering undercurrent, a tension that you might feel, even if vaguely within the societal fabric. The Victorian city itself, with its sprawling uncontrolled growth, was a sensory assault. Characterised by cacophonous noise from carriages and street vendors, Foul smells from open sewers and industrial pollution, and visual chaos with intermingled residential and industrial zones, it presented a constant unhealthy living environment for the working class. This daily exposure to pollution, overcrowding and squalor inevitably bred widespread dissatisfaction. You and your relative comfort might face hidden dangers, but the narrative emphasizes that the poor were even more profoundly vulnerable to these invisible threats. Bacteria, unsmellable gases, unrecognized poisons. These were omnipresent, but their impact was amplified by inferior housing, less access to clean water, and greater exposure to polluted environments. Imagine living in a cramped tenement directly next to a belching factory, with contaminated water drawn from a communal tap. Your precarious existence would be exacerbated by these unseen dangers, a constant low-level assault on your health and well-being. This vulnerability wasn't just abstract. It was a daily reality that cut short lives and fostered endemic suffering among the less fortunate. Despite this relentless onslaught of hidden dangers and pervasive threats, the article repeatedly marvels that millions did survive. This speaks to an almost unbelievable human capacity for resilience and adaptation to a world fundamentally riskier than modern times. You transported from your safe sanitized era might find yourself marveling at this quiet endurance. How did they do it? How did generations navigate a world where a simple cut could turn deadly, where the air you breathed and the food you ate were constant sources of peril? This quiet endurance in the face of the unknown defined the era, a testament to a species capable of adapting to almost anything. Victorian society, for all its dangers, enthusiastically embraced new technologies and products that improved their lives, largely unaware of the dangers these innovations sometimes introduced. This inherent blind spot meant that progress often came at a steep cost, with generations learning through painful, often tragic experience rather than foresight. The thrill of a new gas lamp, the convenience of a mass-produced colourful wallpaper, overshadowed any nascent understanding of the silent poisons they might contain. It's a testament to humanity's drive for advancement, but also a stark reminder that innovation without regulation can be a double-edged sword. You would recognise the pattern, the enthusiastic adoption of new things, the excitement of progress, and the slow, painful realization of their unforeseen consequences. Unlike modern life, which benefits from systemic safety, embedded in everything from product design to urban planning, Victorian daily existence demanded a level of vigilance, physical labour, and acceptance of risk that is now alien to you. Every action, from drinking water to walking down the street, required a conscious or unconscious assessment of potential hazards. This constant, almost unconscious engagement with potential dangers shaped a population accustomed to a different baseline of risk, a resilience born of necessity. You would learn very quickly to be constantly alert, to subtly sniff the air, to scrutinize your food habits that would feel strange and burdensome in your own time. The safety features of modern homes, smoke detectors, lead-free, paint-comprehensive food safety regulations are presented as the direct result of hard lessons learned often at tragic cost. This frames the Victorian era as a crucial, painful crucible where widespread suffering illuminated hidden killers and spurred the slow incremental march towards modern safety standards. You might reflect as you consider these vast differences that the safety and convenience of your present-day world are not accidents of history, but the hard-won legacy of generations who endured, suffered, and eventually learned. The very comforts you barely notice, the clean tap water, the safe food, the well-ventilated rooms, the predictable absence of hidden toxins, are the direct products of Victorian sacrifice and the slow, often painful process of scientific discovery and regulatory reform. It's a humbling thought, transforming seemingly mundane modern amenities into triumphs of collective learning over pervasive peril. Beyond the physical dangers, you'd find that the Victorian world moved at a slower pace, without the constant connectivity and information overload of modern life. There were no smartphones buzzing with notifications, no endless feeds of information vying for your attention. This slower tempo, with its clear social codes and predictable routines, provided a different kind of structure and meaning to daily existence. Perhaps this slower pace, this relative quiet, aided in the psychological adaptation to an otherwise perilous life. Without the constant stimulation and rapid changes of your own era, there was more time for reflection, for observation, for deep engagement with the immediate world around you, even if that world was filled with quiet dangers. It was a life lived in a narrower, deeper channel rather than the broad, shallow flow of modern hyperconnectivity. Now let us shift our focus from the tangible world of dangers and daily routines to the intricate, often restrictive, non-material and interpersonal aspects of the Victorian social fabric. This is where culture, etiquette and relationships truly shaped your experience. The rules of communication and social etiquette were not merely guidelines. They were unspoken laws dictating every interaction. Social interaction, for instance, was a rigidly choreographed affair exemplified by the calling card ritual. This wasn't just a polite exchange, it was a formal system designed to announce visits, gauge willingness to receive guests, and signify social effort and standing. You wouldn't just knock on a door, you would leave a card, wait for a response, and only then, if invited, proceed with a visit, all within a specific narrow window of time. This system provided controlled filter regulating personal access and maintaining strict decorum, ensuring that all interactions were formal and predictable. Conversation, particularly among women, was often couched in coded language and required careful maintenance of propriety. Discussions about seemingly innocuous topics like charity bazaars or flower arrangements frequently served as subtle conduits for local gossip and news about mutual acquaintances. You wouldn't directly ask about a scandal, you would infer it from a carefully chosen phrase or a significant glance. This demanded an ability to read between the lines, to infer unspoken meanings from veiled statements and subtle cues. It was a sophisticated, almost theatrical form of communication, where what was not said was often as important as what was. You would quickly learn to navigate this intricate verbal dance, or risk causing offence or appearing hopelessly gauche. The mental burden of these formal interactions would be something you'd feel acutely. Every single encounter, from addressing servants to receiving visitors, adhered to prescribed rules that demanded a polite, somewhat reserved demeanour, and constant attention and self-monitoring. Imagine having to consciously control your posture, your tone of voice, your facial expressions, your topics of conversation at all times. This relentless performance of etiquette was mentally exhausting, turning even casual encounters into a demanding social tightrope walk. You couldn't just relax and be yourself. You were always on display, always performing your role. It's the Victorian equivalent of being in a constant job interview, but with far higher social stakes. Appearance, as you might recall from the discussion of corsets and walking costumes, was more than just fashion. It was a social commandment. Strict dress codes for specific activities were not merely suggestions, but imperatives. The expectation that no respectable Victorian lady would go outside with bare hands or an uncovered head underscored how attire was a uniform signalling not just social status, but also unwavering adherence to norms. You're not choosing clothes to express your individuality. You're choosing them to signal your conformity, your respectability, and your understanding of the intricate social codes. It's a visual language where every button, every fold of fabric, every accessory communicates your place and your adherence to the rules. Letter writing, a quintessential Victorian leisure activity, was a deliberate, concentrated act, far removed from the instant gratification of modern messaging. It required concentration and care, often executed with a dip pen and ink, demanding patience and a steady hand. This meditative tactile process stood in stark contrast to your rapid communication methods, serving as a primary means of intellectual and emotional expression within the confines of societal expectations. You couldn't just fire off a quick text. You had to carefully compose your thoughts, choose your words precisely, and engage in a painstaking effort to capture them on paper. It was an art form, a craft, and a profound exercise in delayed gratification, where the anticipation of a response was often as significant as the message itself. Even small, spontaneous gestures of affection, such as a quick kiss on the cheek to a child, could be perceived as unusual for a Victorian mother of high social standing. This nuanced social reaction highlighted a cultural preference for emotional restraint and formal displays, suggesting that outward affection was often subdued by behavioural codes. It's not that love didn't exist, but it was expressed differently, often more subtly, through duty provision and meticulous care rather than overt displays of warmth. You might feel a strange chill in the household, an emotional distance that seems unnatural stemming from this cultural suppression of spontaneous feeling. It's a quiet truth that underscores the formal, controlled nature of Victorian relationships. Beyond the rules of interaction, Victorian culture also manifested through various cultural disciplines as performance, particularly in aesthetics and character. You would quickly observe the Victorian love for their stuff. It wasn't just a casual accumulation, it was a near insatiable passion, a deliberate act of filling every available surface with meticulously chosen objects, photographs, small sculptures, vases, books, and decorative boxes. This aesthetic density, what might feel to you like clutter, reflected a profound cultural value placed on material possessions as symbols of taste, status, and an ordered domestic sphere. Every object had its place telling a story reflecting the owner's cultivation and prosperity. Your minimalist tendencies would find no comfort here. This was a world that celebrated abundance and the tangible display of wealth and refinement. Despite the hidden perils lurking within the very materials, there was a deep cultural appreciation for fine craftsmanship and attention to beauty in ordinary things. Homes were filled with ornate handcrafted items, from intricately carved furniture to delicate lace and elaborate decorative pieces. This showcased a society that valued intricate design durability and the human touch in creation, transforming everyday objects into works of art. You might run your hand over a polished wooden surface tracing the delicate carvings and appreciate the immense skill and time that went into its creation, even as you wonder about the toxic varnishes that might have been used. It's a contradiction, a profound appreciation for beauty and quality, alongside a pervasive ignorance or disregard for underlying safety. Victorian culture also infused significant symbolism into flowers, colours, patterns, and decorative motifs, using them to communicate messages that couldn't be spoken directly in a constrained social environment. A specific flower, a particular shade of ribbon, a certain pattern on a fan, each could carry a precise unspoken message of love, longing, sorrow, or disapproval. Even the intricate hair arrangements in mourning jewellery carried precise sentimental messages, a strand of a loved one's hair woven into a brooch or locket. This illustrates a complex unspoken visual language, a subtle form of communication that required keen observation and a deep understanding of cultural codes. You'd feel like you're constantly deciphering a silent conversation, where every aesthetic choice was deliberate and meaningful. The presence of glass cases containing various curiosities, from fossils to taxidermied birds and exotic insects, underscored a widespread passion for collecting and categorizing the natural world. This pursuit aligned with broader Victorian interests in scientific classification and the impulse to bring the wonders of the external world, both grand and minute, into the domestic sphere. You might peer into a dusty glass case, admiring a perfectly preserved specimen, perhaps unaware of the arsenic or mercury used in the taxidermy process. It's a fascinating blend of scientific curiosity, aesthetic appreciation, and again a profound lack of awareness about the dangers of the methods used for preservation. Early photography, unlike your casual phone snaps, was viewed as a serious undertaking. Its long exposure times demanded subjects to remain perfectly still, resulting in the solemn, unsmiling expressions commonly seen in Victorian portraits. This reflected the era's formal approach to personal representation and the novelty of capturing a permanent, often unsmiling image. The very act of being photographed was a performance demanding stillness and composure, which naturally led to the often serious, almost unsmiling countenances we see in so many Victorian portraits. There was no room for quick, spontaneous smiles or candid shots. This formality reflected the era's approach to personal representation, where your image was a carefully curated reflection of your status, and decorum not an expression of fleeting emotion. You would have to hold your pose for what felt like an eternity, your muscles aching, your smile fading until the photographer finally declared it done, and then there was fashion itself as a powerful cultural expression and constraint. The elaborate nature of Victorian fashion, including the strange Victorian fashion invention of bustles, was not merely about style, but served as a powerful cultural expression. These structural undergarments, while shaping the desired silhouette of the time, also physically constrained movement and comfort. They were physical manifestations of societal expectations placed upon women's bodies, dictating not just how they looked, but how they moved, sat and interacted with the world. You'd feel the constant subtle pressure of these undergarments, a persistent reminder of the physical sacrifices made for the sake of cultural adherence. Beyond the tangible and the performative Victorian society was also deeply shaped by its spiritual frameworks and superstitions, a fascinating blend of the seen and unseen worlds. You'd find a complex tapestry of formal religious observance, with a strong Christian influence permeating daily life from Sunday services to moralistic literature. Yet alongside this devout religiosity, there was a pervasive belief in folk superstitions. The casual reference to the witching hour or the subtle avoidance of certain numbers or actions suggests a cultural comfort with the unseen, where omens and traditional beliefs subtly influenced daily interpretations of events. It was a world where science was rapidly advancing, but ancient fears and mystical thinking still held sway in many corners of the mind. One of the most surprising phenomena of the era was the widespread popularity of spiritualism. Seances and spirit communications were a fashionable pastime, especially among the upper classes. Imagine attending a dinner party where after dessert the lights are dimmed and a medium attempts to contact the deceased. This widespread fascination, even extending to figures like Queen Victoria in her later years, reflected a profound cultural yearning for connection to the afterlife, a belief in the ability to bridge the gap between worlds. It was a curious blend of scientific curiosity about the unknown and a deep emotional need for solace in an era defined by frequent loss. You might find yourself intrigued or perhaps deeply skeptical by the performances and pronouncements of these spiritual practitioners. Despite the lack of modern scientific understanding of germs, Victorians sometimes practiced intuitive health practices and ancient wisdom. They intuitively valued ventilation and outdoor activity, particularly for children. Regular walks, regardless of weather, were considered essential for health, demonstrating a practical approach to well-being that often blended empirical observation with long-held quasi-spiritual beliefs about fresh air or miasma, bad air causing disease. You'd notice this intuitive understanding manifesting in open windows even in chilly weather, or the insistence on a daily constitutional rain or shine. While the reasons might have been based on flawed theories, the practical outcome was often beneficial, contributing to a certain robustness despite the dangers of the age. And while basic hygiene might have been primarily practical, some aspects could intertwine with a deeper, almost ritualistic importance, especially in elite circles. The meticulousness of dressing and grooming, while partly practical, also served as a daily affirmation of social status and purity, mirroring a desire for order and control over one's body in a world of unseen threats and chaotic urban environments. It was an almost spiritual performance of cleanliness, a small act of bringing order to the disordered world. Now let's delve into the pragmatic and constrained realities of love, marriage and family life in the Victorian era. For most Victorians across all social strata, marriage was less about romantic love and more a pragmatic alliance. You might be accustomed to the idea of marrying solely for love, but here such notions were often relegated to fiction. A girl's education, as you've seen, was explicitly designed to make her an attractive marriage prospect, highlighting the profound economic and social considerations that underpinned marital unions rather than personal fulfillment. It was a contract, a merger of families and fortunes where compatibility and social standing often outweighed passionate attachment. From childhood, the relative freedom of childhood would give way to the rigid expectations of Victorian girlhood and womanhood. Women's lives were increasingly disciplined with corsets and restrictive clothing, and their behaviour would be moulded according to strict social codes. This severely limited their personal agency within relationships and dictated their roles from the domestic sphere to public interactions. You would feel the tightening grip of these expectations, a narrowing of your world as you transitioned from youth to womanhood, with fewer and fewer choices available to you. Middle and upper class women in particular were largely confined to the separate sphere of the domestic realm. This ideological confinement, while paradoxically considering women morally superior to men, also deemed them intellectually inferior. Their energies were channeled almost exclusively into household management, child-rearing and social duties, severely limiting their public influence or professional ambitions. It was a gilded cage offering comfort but denying true autonomy or intellectual pursuits beyond the home. You might feel the frustration of this constraint, the quiet longing for a wider world that remains out of reach. The omnipresent shadow of child mortality, with its heartbreakingly high rates, due to prevalent diseases, instilled a constant pervasive fear of losing their little ones. This profound anxiety may have contributed to a perceived emotional distance in parenting that feels strange to modern sensibilities. Perhaps it was a coping mechanism, a way to guard against the inevitable pain of loss, to build a wall of stoicism around one's heart. The unspoken realities of spousal relations were also quite different. The common practice of separate bedrooms among the Victorian upper classes hints at a more formal, less intimate conjugal relationship than modern expectations. This arrangement underscored a cultural preference for propriety and social order, even within the most personal of relationships. It was a space for decorum, for individual privacy, rather than a shared sanctuary of intimacy. You might find this arrangement strangely isolating, a reflection of a world where emotional closeness was often sacrificed for the sake of appearances and convention. While romantic love certainly existed and was beautifully expressed in the literature and poetry of the era, the practicalities of Victorian life meant that romantic love was often relegated to the realm of novels and poetry. It was a subject to be explored in fiction, where it could be passionate and grand without disrupting the pragmatic social structures governing real-life unions. In the cold light of day, real marriages were about alliances, about progeny, about property, not about soulmates. You might find yourself searching for genuine affection in the interactions around you, only to find a veneer of polite formality that rarely cracked. Finally, we consider the weight of clan identity, the collective over the individual, a profound difference that would significantly shape your experience. In this era, an individual's actions carried immense generational impact, directly affecting the reputation of the entire lineage. This emphasized a powerful collective identity, often referred to as ki, in some cultural studies where personal conduct was inseparable from the family's honour and standing within the community. You're not just yourself. You are a representative of your family, your ancestors, and your descendants. This concept fundamentally suppressed individualism. Your personal desires and aspirations often yielded to the demands of family duty and societal expectation. Conformity to strict social codes was paramount not just for personal propriety, but for upholding the family's prestige. Any deviation, any scandal, any misstep could bring shame upon the entire clan, creating immense pressure for disciplined behaviour and faultless public presentation. Imagine the constant internalised censor, the fear of bringing disgrace not just upon yourself, but upon everyone connected to you. It's a weight you would feel in every decision, every word, every gesture. The pervasive public scrutiny, the constant awareness of being watched and judged by society from table manners to a mother's demonstrativeness with her child, meant that every action, even within the private sphere, was subject to community judgment. This fundamentally shaped one's standing and severely limited personal expression. You would always be aware of the eyes on you internalising the gaze of society. The psychological toll of this conformity was immense, even leading to extreme medical treatments for female hysteria, which, as we discussed, often stemmed from suppressed emotional or physical ailments. This demonstrated society's willingness to pathologise individual distress rather than acknowledge systemic constraints. The psychological toll of this conformity was immense, even leading to extreme medical treatments for female hysteria, which, as we discussed, often stemmed from suppressed emotional or physical ailments. This demonstrated society's willingness to pathologise individual distress rather than acknowledge systemic constraints. It reflected a cultural imposition of roles that profoundly impacted personal well-being, demanding that individuals conform to an ideal that was often at odds with their inner lives. You would learn to suppress your own feelings, to wear a mask of placid acceptance lest you be labelled as unwell or worse as a social deviant. Any scandal or transgression by an individual, no matter how seemingly small, could have far-reaching impact on the entire lineage. Imagine for a moment an indiscretion, a perceived moral failing, a breach of social code. This wasn't merely a personal embarrassment. It was a blot on the family name, potentially leading to social ostracism or a damaged reputation for generations. A brother's gambling debts, a sister's perceived impropriety, a distant cousin's ill-advised marriage all could reflect poorly on you and your immediate family, casting a long dark shadow over your prospects and standing. This severe consequence reinforced the absolute primacy of the collective identity over individual desires or actions. Your fate, your perceived worth, was inextricably tied to the conduct of your entire family tree. It's a weight that you accustomed to a world that celebrates individual achievement and personal responsibility would find profoundly suffocating. There was no escaping the sins of your forefathers or the faux pas of your contemporaries. Ultimately, the Victorian emphasis on the clan as the primary source of identity meant that individualism as you understand it was fundamentally suppressed. Personal desires and aspirations often yielded to the relentless demands of family duty and societal expectation. You didn't pursue a career because it fulfilled you. You pursued it because it brought honour or stability to your family. You didn't marry for passion alone. You married for the betterment of the collective unit. This profound cultural difference meant that the self was defined not by its unique attributes or desires, but by its place within a larger, unyielding social structure. It's like being a single brick in a magnificent towering edifice. You are crucial to its integrity, but your individual shape is largely dictated by the needs of the whole. You might feel a quiet ache for self-expression, a longing for autonomy that simply has no place in this meticulously ordered collective world. You've journeyed through a world shaped by unseen dangers, by relentless toil, by strict social codes, and by a profound sense of collective identity. You've experienced the subtle discomforts, the hidden perils, and the unspoken rules that governed every moment of Victorian life. It's a world that, for all its romanticized beauty, demanded a level of resilience and conformity that would exhaust your modern spirit in mere hours. As the images of Victorian life begin to gently recede, allow your mind to drift away from the scent of coal smoke and lye soap, from the chill of bare floors and the constraint of corsets. Feel the quiet hum of your own modern home around you, the gentle reassurance of central heating, the effortless stream of clean, safe water from a tap. Think of the soft comfort of your bed, free from lumpy horsehair, and the unburdened ease of your breath. These small, seemingly insignificant comforts are not mere luxuries. They are the hard-won legacy of centuries past, the silent triumphs born from the very hardships you've just explored. The dangers, the discomforts, the rigid expectations, they all belong to a world that is now quietly fading into history. There's no need to cling to them. Allow yourself to release any lingering tension, any thought of unlit fireplaces or unpasteurized milk. The work of survival in the Victorian era is done for tonight. Let the stillness settle around you, wrapping you in a blanket of present-day peace. Your day is safe now, your sleep is secure. Let your mind clear, your muscles relax, and your breath deepen. Drift softly into the quiet comfort of your own time and space.